Hey friends, this is day 34 of Russian war against Ukraine. In the last couple of days, a lot of things have happened, mostly on the diplomatic front, but also we're seeing some movement of Russian troops back to their original positions in Kyiv and Chernihiv, so we'll talk about that. So a few things we'll talk about. First is that the peace agreement is moving forward. Ukrainian side had made a suggestion which will be taken to Putin to sign, and then hopefully that will speed up the ending of this war. We're going to talk about the Azeybarzhan and the moves they're making in the contested territories in their country. We're going to talk about one of the Russian oligarchs, Abromovich, who was turns out was a go-between Russia and Ukraine in the early days, and he was poisoned, and then finally, Russian plan to selling natural gas in rubles instead of dollars now backfires, which is quite ironic. So we're talking about that. So the biggest one is that today, earlier by Ukrainian time, was the third, or this is the fourth round of peace talks between delegations from Ukraine and Russia, and they came out, and Ukrainian representatives said that they had submitted a peace proposal that should be ratified or agreed to by the Russian president. What's in the agreement? So number one, and the biggest one, is the security guarantee. Security guarantees basically means that since Ukraine is not in one of the security alliances like NATO or any other one, we have to come up with our own framework of security. So this one will be a freely joinable agreement between countries, guarantors of security, that will emulate what NATO does, but have a stricter policy towards consultations in case one country gets attacked. So as you know, with NATO Chapter 5, it says that in case one country gets attacked, it will be considered that all countries got attacked. But what that means in NATO is that countries will begin consultations, and consultations can mean a lot of things. It doesn't mean that other countries will start fighting for the country that was attacked. So in the Ukrainian framework that they're talking about, they're saying that within our rules, it will be 3 days for consultations, which is a way to diplomatically end the war. But if that doesn't work, then other countries in this agreement will start to deliver weaponry and even troops. So Ukraine, we're seeing, is creating the security alliance around itself. Russia is proposed to be one of the guarantors of this security agreement, which is iffy, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So number two in this proposal is Crimea. So Ukrainian delegation is proposing to freeze the question of Crimea for 15 years. Sorry, not freeze, but put it into the diplomatic consultation realm for 15 years, and then after 15 years, the decision has to be made on what's happening in Crimea. And the little context behind that, the Mikhailo Podolyak, who is the head of the Ukrainian delegation, and he's also the Minister of Foreign Affairs, he's saying that we have to understand that Russia was not willing to talk about Crimea since 2014. So this was, as long as this question was brought up, they always shut it down. They never went to discuss this at all. So putting Crimea on the agenda, but after the ceasefire, is actually a win for Ukraine. Also, this suggestion on peace agreement opens the way for Ukraine to European Union. So countries who are in the European Union are agreeing to support suggestions within the Union for Ukraine to join. Okay. Yeah, well, let's talk about these because a few of these things are weird. So number one is that Russia is one of the guarantors. So the details of this agreement or agreements of this kind is that if any military training like Russia was conducting 2 months on Ukrainian borders before, on this agreement will have to be coordinated with the countries, with the guarantor countries, which means that if Ukraine wants to hold military training or have joint military training, let's say, as a Rapid Trident a few years ago with the Americans, they will have to agree. Countries' guarantors have to agree to this training. Which, if Russia is part of the countries, they're never going to agree to it. Weird, but okay. So that's one weird thing. Another thing is that everybody understands that Russia is not going to abide by this agreement, even if they agree to. All the analysts are saying, and I think the diplomats are not saying, but understand it, that while Putin is in power, he will try to destroy Ukraine. We cannot get back our territories in Crimea and in the eastern Ukraine. So this is done to cease fire now, and then transfer these questions into the diplomatic realm. Of course, it's important to note that all of these wins in Ukraine are possible only because of the military successes of Ukrainian army, which have been able to push out Russian troops from Kiev region and Chernihiv region. We're seeing, and American intelligence is confirming this, that they're moving to their back positions, which Russia says, yeah, we're going to change our priorities. Remember that hot air that they were trying to express a few days ago, that they said we never had as our goal to take Kyiv. We're only here to protect the Donbass region, and totally reframing this, totally 1984ing it, so to say. We're at war with Oceania. Oceania is our best friend. So that's what Russians are doing, and they're saying, well, we're pulling back our armed forces because it was never our goal to take Kyiv. But of course, the reality is that our forces are resisting them successfully. They see no perspective no future in taking Kyiv. That's not happening, so they're pulling back. Of course, the danger of that is that they're going to try to redeploy the same troops, rotate them to the eastern regions, and we're still worried about what's going to happen with Mariupol because it's unlivable as it is. So we're going to keep watching that. Of course, this suggestion is just a suggestion. It's not a peace deal yet. They have to show it to Putin, and as if he does accept it, then our President Zelensky and Putin will meet to sign the agreement. So, big picture, it's debatable whether this is good for us or not. Of course, the Ukrainian negotiators are saying this is good. The spokesman for Ukrainian Defense, Alexei Arestovich, says this is good because going into the war, we were a standalone country, meaning we're not part of any military alliance without guarantees, but coming out of the war will be a standalone country with guarantees, because Ukraine, as part of this agreement, does say we're not going to join military alliances like NATO. So he sees it as a win, and if you look at it from a certain perspective where Russia was not even willing to discuss anything about Crimea or eastern territories there, they can now do so. They have been forced by Ukrainian military success to do that. So I don't know what to think about it myself. I see some declaring it as capitulation of Russia, others looking at it and say, well, this just invites another war, because if we're going to stay independent and if we're not going to solve the question of Crimea and eastern part of Ukraine now, that just means they're going to try to invade us again in a few years. So let's see what happens, because this is just a suggestion. It's unclear whether Putin will agree to this or not, and whether they're going to come back. But what is clear is that Russian demands have gone a lot more soft, and they're willing to talk about a lot more points than they originally started with. You remember, originally their demands, their ultimatum was demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. Now that's not even on the table. They're definitely pulling back. They're definitely making their demands a lot more reasonable. Okay, so that's what's happening with that. I'm trying to see whether I'm missing anything from here, but immediate effect, if this is implemented, would be that the ceasefire on all the territory of Ukraine that Ukraine currently controls. There was a story from maybe 4 days ago that one of the Russian oligarchs, Abromovich, remember he was the owner of the football club Chelsea in England, which was taken away from him, and it turns out he was sort of a go-between Russia and Ukraine on these peace talks. He's trying to work in the back office and back channel between the two governments. So the story goes that 4 days ago, as they were working on the peace agreement, as Russia was realizing they lost militarily, they're not making any grounds, they're being pushed back. What happened first was Zelensky made this handwritten note to Putin saying something like, let's meet, here's something we agree to, here's something we'll never agree to. And so Abromovich and his people took it personally to Putin. Putin crumpled down the piece of paper and said, tell him I will destroy them. So Putin said to Zelensky, tell him I will destroy them, meaning Ukraine. So he was not having any of it. And then a couple of days later, so this was 2 days ago, it turns out that Abromovich and his partner in this venture were poisoned. So they had all the properties of being poisoned. They felt sick. Their skin started to come off, but luckily they didn't die. They recovered in the hospital the next day. So yesterday they were fine. So, and there was a lot of controversy around what happened with them being poisoned, and the United States said, well, their poisoning had nothing to do with the special operation in Ukraine. It's not the FSB who was trying to poison them. It was just they said environmental factors. But like, what? What, they poisoned from the air or from what? Because Abromovich says they only ate chocolate and water. So unless it was, special chocolate, I don't see how they could be poisoned. So we see that Putin is raging. Remember, I told you about his defense minister Shoigu, who was missing for a couple of weeks. He did finally emerge yesterday on Russian TV, talking about how they will redeploy their forces to eastern Ukraine from Kiev. So some experts are saying, there's a couple of Washington-based Russian experts. One of them is Andrei Pentkovsky, and I've been following him. He's pretty knowledgeable. He knows history of Soviet Union pretty well and history in general. So he says that what we're not seeing directly, but we're seeing signals of, is that the Russian generals are staging a soft coup against Putin. And the way we see this is that they are declaring goals that are contrary to Putin. So we're seeing that, for example, they had a meeting of generals today, and they were a lot more tame in their rhetoric against Ukraine and how the war is going. They did admit to their defeats and their pullbacks and everything, and this goes against what Putin keeps saying. He makes those press conferences where he's still radical, he's still the top dog, but we see that his generals are saying things contrary to him. They're pulling back their forces. They're talking about alternative ways to resolve this war. So some experts are saying that the soft coup had already started. I'm not knowledgeable enough to judge any of this. I hope so, but let's see, because the only way to forcibly remove Putin at this point is either Ukrainian forces go into Moscow, which is not happening. Ukraine is not about that, but or the palace coup, where his own high officials physically remove him. Okay, so that's that story. Interesting about Azeybarzhan. So, the Russia was trying to reinforce their troops in Ukraine, and they've been trying to scrape up people from all over the world. It's not working really well for them. They're trying to find reserves in Russia, even stooping down to debtors and alimony payers, saying, we will forgive your debts if you if you agree to go to Ukraine, they've been trying to in several Russian regions to do clandestine mobilization. So that's not working for them. So what they've been forced to do is to take some of the troops they have in other parts of Russia and pull them into Ukraine, which opens up possibilities for other countries to claim their contested territories, which had already happened in Azeybarzhan. So as soon as Russian troops moved from the territory called Nagorny Karabakh, and moved in with their own troops and started making so far diplomatic demands like, don't call it Nagorny Karabakh, because that's not what that is. That is Azerbaijani territory. So we're seeing some countries are starting to leverage the situation with Ukraine to get back their territories, and good for them. I'm hoping, Japan and Moldova kind of clue up to what's going on. All right, and then finally, it came out a few days ago that Russia, trying to circumvent their economic woes and the sanctions that have been imposed on them, they said that we will now only sell our oil and natural gas for rubles, which means that countries in European Union, America is not buying it anymore, but countries in the European Union will have to buy rubles first and then use the rubles to buy natural gas and oil. And of course, this will have an intended effect of ruble be costing more and bolstering Russian economy. European Union is not having any of that. They're saying not only we will not buy with rubles, and the President Macron from France said this, Chancellor of Germany said this. We will not only do that, we will from now on bargain for the contracts of natural gas and oil as European Union, not as separate countries where Russia can play them off one another, but as European Union, which means that they will go into a united bargaining position, and this will bring down the price at which they buy the resources and stuff like that. So we're seeing that Russia's plan is really backfiring, which is nice to see. At least in some ways, European Union growing some balls and resisting Russia. In fact, Germany had announced that they will end their dependence on Russian oil by the end of this year and stop buying Russian natural gas by the end of 2024. Okay, so as you can see, things are happening. Most of them are good. Some of them are troubling, as having Russia as one of the guarantor countries in the proposed peace agreement. But that does not diminish my trust in Ukrainian government at this point. With Ukraine, it's funny. In peacetime, we all fight with each other and over every little thing. But when there is an external enemy, we all unite and fight them. So in this case, I do have a lot of problems with current president and the government and the way they do things. But when we have an external enemy, that's what you have to do is to trust that they're having the same interests and same values, national values, as I do. And I think in those main questions, we are truly on the same page. All right, so that's what's happening in Ukraine today. Thank you, friends, for your feedback and support and questions. I'm sorry I'm not replying to most of you right away. I've been just swamped with work and have other things going on with my business. But I'm hoping that I will catch up to those messages. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.